Happy New Year and welcome to Voices of CFMA, Construction Financial Management Association's podcast featuring conversations with industry leaders, sponsored by Old Republic Surety. I'm your host, Sal Marino, CFMA's Marketing and Content Manager. This month, I am talking with Bryce McDermott. Bryce is CFO at Branco Enterprises. He is one of the founders of CFMA's Ozarks Chapter and a member of the 2022-23 Executive Committee. Bryce, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me today.
Very glad to be here.
So, can you tell me a little bit about your current role and maybe about your journey on how you got here?
Sure. Yeah. Well, I've been in this role in some capacity for 23 years at Branco Enterprises. Branco is a general contractor located in Neosho, Missouri, down here in the southwest corner of the state. We're not a giant contractor. We've got about 140 employees, and our volume will, range somewhere in the 60 to $80 million range on a typical year. We're diverse. We do a lot of different, a lot of schools, water treatment plants. We do a little bit of work for Department of Transportation. So we're kind of spread out in that regard, and it really probably has helped us sustain through some downturns along the way in those 23 years, because we're not married to any one sector of the construction industry. But how I got here is I started out in public accounting. I was at BKD and did that for 8 years, and I went into a niche specialty while I was there, amongst other things, construction. And that kind of was a natural thing for me. I grew up in a home where my dad was a home builder. And so from the time I was old enough to stand, it felt like I was on a job site, fetching and carrying and doing those things. And then as I grew older and got a little stronger, then got to do a few more things in that world. So construction is definitely in my blood. And when I was in public accounting, I always knew that if I ever left BKD, it would be for a construction company. And when this opportunity presented itself, well, to be honest with you, the first time this presented itself, I acted too slow. I talked about it, I thought about it, and they ended up hiring another gentleman from a very large local company. And I thought, well, missed that opportunity. And well, as it turns out, that guy wasn't the right fit. And he lasted a grand total of about 3 months. And the job became open again. They hadn't even posted it. These guys were actually, Branco was a client. And so I heard about it through the grapevine, and I thought, last time I just drug my feet, I didn't act, and I kept wondering, did I miss an opportunity? So I just picked up the phone and called John Branham, who's the majority stockholder and president at the time of Branco, and I said, John, you don't know me from Adam, but because I didn't really have any inputs on their account, and I said, but here's who I am, and here's my background, and just, would you like to talk? And I met with John, his wife Violet, and the HR manager at the time. Her name was Judy. We met down here on a Saturday afternoon, and Sunday he called and offered me the job. And Monday I turned in my notice to BKD, and 23 years later, here I sit. So,
wow. Well, that has to feel somewhat like it was meant to be, right?
Well, it was really, it to say it felt like home from the beginning, I guess is probably about the best way for me to describe it. And, it's Branco is located not too far from where I grew up. I grew up in a small town called Granby, which is not too far from Neosho, where Branco is. And so I was familiar with Branco. And so, yeah, it definitely kind of felt like it was meant to be. And I guess the fact that I'm here 23 years later maybe speaks to that, right?
It definitely does. So with a journey like that, How do you get involved with CFMA?
Well, John Branham, the same gentleman who I met down here on a Saturday, and are again the majority owner here at Branco. I admittedly had never even heard of CFMA at that time. BKD was not the national partner that they are today, and actually it's four of us now, as we all know. But anyway, back in those days, that really wasn't on the radar for me, and so I'd been here for, I don't even know if I'd been here a year, and John came to me with this information about this organization, and they were having the national conference that year that was coming up was in Orlando, Florida. And he encouraged me to go, encouraged me to get involved in this, and so at the time there was no local chapter here in this part of the state. The closest chapter to me was Kansas City. So when I joined CFMA, that was my chapter affiliation, but I never attended any meetings in Kansas City because we're about 2.5 to 3 hours, south of there, and it just wasn't practical to do that. But I did go to the national conference. I was very, I guess, shocked and awed at the conference itself, just the continuing education that was available. I'm a CPA, and so that was a nice find that there was some industry specific education. And then, I'll be honest with you, I called myself the invisible member at that point. And I probably took advantage of that. I guess I shouldn't admit this out loud, but this isn't being recorded, right?
No, we're fine.
So, I didn't really know anybody. Nobody knew me. It was easy for me to just kind of mill around and then disappear if I wanted to disappear for a while. And so I know I didn't get a fraction out of that first conference that I could have, and what I've gotten out of it since then. But so over time, I attended several more of the national conferences, and still had no local chapter affiliation. And I started getting to know a few more people. Over time, you start seeing some of the same faces, and so I can't remember at what point I had first inquired about what does it take to start a chapter. And I remember talking to some folks at the national conference and getting that question rolling. Well, it never really got any traction until probably around 2014, 13 or 14. There was enough of us here locally that had, and this is by then BKD had kind of emerged as a national partner with CFMA. And so BKD, obviously I still have connections there, both as friends and as a client. And so I worked closely with Matt Cash. Ben Stone was another name that a former BKD guy who had left and gone into industry and was working with a general contractor, and still there, by the way. But so we gathered about 5 or 6 people, and we formed this steering committee and came up with the name Ozarks Chapter. And we went through all the processes that you have to do to get chapter formation. The Ozarks Chapter, I think, created some confusion for some people. I think in especially up in the Northeast, I know when I was talking to some of the folks at National, they were like, Ozarks Chapter, that just feels like that should be more, not where you guys are at. And, but the reason why we picked that name is we didn't want it to be isolated to just Southwest Missouri. We're down here in the corner where we're at, we're close enough to Arkansas, Oklahoma, and Kansas that we cross the borders quite a bit.
Right.
And so it made sense for us, but that, has created some hurdles for us to overcome, since then, but I could talk about that here in a little bit. So anyway, 2016, we were formally approved as a chapter. And so we are, 6 years in, going on 7 years as a chapter. And it really accelerated what I have gotten out of CFMA. I mean, have thrown myself into it. I'm, have gone from being real active at the local level now to getting more involved at the national level with committees, and then most recently become a member of the executive committee for CFMA. And so it just seems like, well, it's like anything, in life, the more you put into it, the more you get out of it. And I would say this is absolutely my journey, that exponentially I've gotten more out of it since I've put more into it. So
It also must be easier to put more into it once you feel like you have a home, right? Like, it didn't sound like you were able to connect too much with the Kansas City chapter, since it really wasn't your local chapter per se.
yeah, and to be honest with you, I didn't. Probably the first connections I made at the national conference really happened on the golf course. There's they always have a golf tournament at the conference, and again at that time I would just sign up as an individual, and I would get paired with random people, and but that turned out to be a great thing for me, because then I would see some of those people, either at that year's conference or subsequent conferences, and we'd recognize each other. And that's how things started kind of snowballing a little bit as far as that national peer network.
So I don't know much about founding my own CFMA chapter, but I have to imagine that it must have felt like a pretty big undertaking at some point, right?
Well, it does, especially coming from we're basically a rural area, certainly in contrast to some of the larger cities that where some of our chapters are. But geographically, we're pretty spread out. So probably one of the things that we had to overcome, and quite frankly are still working on, is just the brand recognition. I mean, a lot of contractors in this area, still to this day, if I said CFMA, probably wouldn't know what that means. So yeah, so that's probably one of the biggest hurdles we had to overcome, is just getting out in front of folks and trying to explain to them, what exactly is CFMA and why do we need this in our lives. I think that the members that we started with, for the most part are still here. We haven't lost very many. We probably haven't really grown we definitely haven't grown to the degree that I would have envisioned over, a 5-year, 6-year plan. But we're trying some new things here at our local chapter level to try to build on that. But to answer your question, as far as what goes into it, probably the most critical thing is just a strong steering committee, people that have a genuine and passionate interest in getting that in place. And I was very blessed to have a good group around us there that got that going. It's very, very important, both in formation and then in continuation, that that your chapter has a good ratio of general members, and with the associate members, because clearly, let's be honest, the associate members are there to provide services to the general members, and so that's their motivation to be a part of it. And then so if you don't have the general members, the associate members have really no reason to continue coming around. So we worked hard to get that ratio up, and we continue to work on that, to maintain that. So it was it's definitely been, like I said, a blessing. The geographic challenges that we have, as far as how far apart some of our I guess population points are. Down here you got Springfield, Missouri, you got Joplin, Missouri, and then outlier parts there. Bringing everybody together for meetings sometimes presents a challenge, but we certainly have chapters across the country that are much more bigger footprints than that. I think about North Dakota, and
Right.
the whole state is a chapter, and
Yep.
we got no excuses down here. So,
And I would think too that just being called the Ozarks chapter, because it expands across so many states. What is it, like 4 or 5 states, the Ozarks?
Yeah. Yeah. Of course, the real Ozarks is right here, right? But
Right. Yeah.
yeah, all those other guys are pretenders, but uh, yeah, that may have been part of what the confusion was early on, was that, if somebody else has got uh, a definition of that pinpoints a different spot on the map, then maybe that. But certainly the folks around here, whenever I'm out trying to market the Ozarks chapter of CFMA, it's definitely going to resonate, with that group. So
Right. And that makes total sense. So let's switch gears a little bit and talk about advice. Are you able to tell me the best piece of advice that you've ever been given?
uh, I've gotten a lot of good advice over the years, and I've got and I hope everybody either has this or will develop this in their lifetime, a Mount Rushmore of their mentors and people that they most admire. One of those people for me was one of the partners at BKD, Glenn Barnett. And Glenn, when I started at BKD in 1992, he really took me under his wing. He became that part of my mountain, for me. And so the thing that he said to me that I held strong to was, he said, from the day you walk in here, even though you're a staff accountant and, you're at the bottom of the totem pole, I want you to have the mentality and the approach to your job as if you're a partner or an owner in this organization. And he said, if you will have an owner's mentality and, do what's right for the company, he said, everything else will fall in place for you. And so I took that to heart. Everything I did when I was at BKD was to promote the organization, to believe in the place that I was at. And I carried that with me when I came to Branco in 1999. And then, I think that no matter what your role is in an organization, if you're the new staff accountant at a construction company or in a public accounting setting or whatever it is you do in life, if you maintain that you're not just the AP clerk, but you have an important role with that organization, then I think it will pay dividends in the long run. And that same gentleman, Glenn, gave me another great piece of advice as I was exiting. And by the way, that was a very hard conversation for me whenever I made the decision to come down here to go tell Glenn that I was leaving. And he was very supportive of me. He was, but he told me that, when you go to this new role, he said, you're going to be probably tempted to jump in immediately and start making changes. And he said, so I'm going to just advise you that when you get in there, he said, listen and observe, but don't offer anything until you really understand and have digested what's going on, because you really don't know until you've taken the time to do both of those things. And I've tried, I don't always succeed in that, but I've tried to employ that advice in other areas of my life that, we all are probably guilty of not listening enough. And my wife would tell you, I probably don't listen nearly enough, but I really do feel like that advice, I came down here with that mindset. And I think those first 2 or 3 months, I truly didn't offer up any suggestions for system improvements or anything like that. But then once I did, it was based on some well thought out, observances and then bringing in that experience and things that I'd seen from other places. And it really, I think, accelerated my success here.
And like you said, I think that's the advice that works across all aspects of your life. I think I need to be better at times with active listening and just thinking about things before I react.
Yeah. I truly do think, and I've heard this from others, and I'm sure you have too, but it truly is one of those things that, collectively, we all probably fail at times, that we don't listen enough. And I know one thing that I guess I'll say this a little bit with a chuckle, because I don't know that I've really gotten there yet. As I've matured, as a person over time, I've tried to be a little bit more, try to see things through other people's points of view, and don't be so pigeonholed in the way, because I was raised in Southwest Missouri, where, the show me state, and, everything's black and white and everything's got to fit in this lane. And then as I've, expanded my horizons and my network of people, and whether it be people of different races or religions or whatever, you realize that, hey, the whole world wasn't raised in Granby, Missouri, and not everybody thinks the way we do in Granby, Missouri, and that doesn't make either one of us right or wrong.
So keeping on the subject of advice, what advice do you have to someone who is new to the industry?
Oh, there's, again, I can think of a lot of things. I do think that there's a tremendous value in investing in yourself, and that includes both time and money. So, understand that the person that benefits the most from continuing your education and broadening your horizons, and it could be specific to accounting, certainly, but even things outside, other interests, because you never know when that, these other things that you might delve into might translate into something else that enhances your career. And then, I guess kind of along those lines, and maybe a good segue or tie into what this organization's about is networking. To me, is so critical. If you look at where I am today, and then you look at the people that I have affiliated with, I've got a tremendous network of people that I can call on at any time. And it sometimes that's selfish. I mean, it may be for selfish reasons that maybe I need somebody to help me hook up with some Chiefs tickets to go watch the Raiders lose to the Chiefs. And I didn't phrase that correctly, by the way. Or maybe it's I've ran into a situation here at work with something I've not ran into before, but I think, oh gosh, I remember hearing about that at a conference, and, maybe I can reach out and find. So all of those things are just going to add value to what you're going to bring to the table. And, if you're working for a company where you've got an owner, like in my situation, a small family owned business, when they recognize that, man, he's got these resources that he can get answers for us, I think it really truly does help. And the things that I have already kind of brought out that was given to me, I would pass on to anybody. Have an owner's mentality. When you come to work, you're not there to I think of the old it's almost cliche now, where the guy walks up to the guys that are laying blocks, and asks the first guy, what are you doing? And he says, I'm laying blocks. And he asks the second guy, what are you doing? I'm building this wall. And the third guy's, I'm building a beautiful cathedral. And it's all a matter of your perspective, and what do you really want people to know about you?
It's all a matter of perspective. Bryce, it has been terrific talking to you. Is there anything else you'd like to say before we sign off on this episode of Voices of CFMA?
I appreciate the opportunity to get on here and share some of my journey, and I would say that if anybody's listening to this, if you're thinking about let's say you're involved in CFMA right now, but you're not really involved. Maybe you're a member. Maybe you're the invisible member that I used to be at one time. You truly will find that if you apply yourself, get involved with committees, volunteer at the national level even, and don't be afraid, because I think one thing that I've learned is I've gotten to know personally some of the folks that have served at the national level as officers and so forth, that at one time or another they were just the member, just like me, just like they are, so don't limit yourself in your membership in CFMA by not getting involved, and you will definitely see the dividends on the other side.
Well, there you have it, ladies and gentlemen, from the once invisible member. Bryce, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me today. I truly appreciate it.
All right. I appreciate it, and hope everybody has a great 2023.
And thank you, everyone, for listening to another episode of Voices of CFMA, sponsored by Old Republic Surety. If you enjoyed this podcast, don't forget to like and subscribe and share on social media. And if you're interested in learning more about the Construction Financial Management Association, check out cfma.org. Once again, I'm your host, Sal Marino, and I will see everyone back here next month. Thanks.